How's it going, guys? So in today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make this really cool animating loop. We got a bunch of really cool agreeable stuff going on. We're going to be using an add-on to make this really interesting variable height kind of grid on the bottom, having some fun with animation and some glowing. So we're going to get into that right after this quick message. Today's video is brought to you by the Realtime Materials. It is a collection of 200 fully editable and procedural materials made for Eevee and cycles. There's a wide variety of materials going from marble to ceramics to plaster and tons of beautiful abstract materials. If you would like to know more, hit the link in the description below. All right, we're back. If you want to see the sort of grayscale view of what's happening here, this is what we've created. And yeah, so let's go ahead and get into how to make this. We're going to be making this flat portion first. So let's go ahead and get a new blank document and let me show you what add-on we're using. All right, so in the description, I'm going to link this add-on right here. It's totally free and you can choose to donate some if you'd like. And this is how we're making the grids. It's called Grid Breaker. It's a really, really cool add-on and let me show you how to use it. First off, when you download it, you're going to get a zip file. All you're going to want to do is go to Edit, Preferences. Make sure to not unzip the file. If you're using Mac, it'll probably unzip it for you. Be sure to zip that back up. Don't use the internal files here. Then right over here, you're going to click on add-ons. You'll click install, and then you'll just go to your desktop, wherever you chose to save it. And for me, it's right here, Grid Breaker, kind of slurred there. And just double click it, and then you'll see right here, Mesh Grid Breaker. Click the little check mark, and you'll be ready to go. Now, if it doesn't work, be sure to hit up the developer. I didn't have any problems, so I'm not sure how I would fix any problems that come up, but it should work just fine for you. So what you'll do is you'll click this little arrow here and you'll see Grid Breaker. You don't need any mesh to start with. Just click the plus icon and you have your mesh. Now, here's how it works. It's really, really cool. So here is your cuts here. So if you add cuts, you add more. It's almost like a big city. You can add these sort of low poly cities if you want. I'm going to keep my cuts at 3 because I want 3 levels of detail for my scene. After that, it can get pretty heavy, and the more things you add to this add-on, the more computationally heavy it will get. So keep that in mind. Here we have distribution. So you can, the smaller distribution, the more just regular squares you'll get. The more distribution here you get, the more smaller cubes. So I'm going to keep mine at 0.8 here. Because I kind of like this distribution here for what we're going to be designing. And then you do have a seed right here in case you're not a fan of what's going on. It's a little buggy once we get into these higher pieces, but the developer said he will be updating and adding new features as he goes along, so keep an eye out for that. I'm going to do 0.75 actually. I feel like that's a lot better. Now we can go ahead and add our height. Now, let's go ahead to my flat view, and I'm going to bring my height down a little bit because I don't want it too tall. Something like this. And also, if you don't like the margin, you can bring the margin down, and that gives you more space there, which is what I'm going to do right now. So now you have your height. What's really, really cool is we have random height. And now you get more random height. If you bring our height up here, like 0.5 here, look at that. Look how cool that is. That's super exciting for this add-on. I think that's one thing that makes it super special. And yeah, so let's go ahead and bring that 0.2 maybe, 0.05. This will probably do. Now here's something that's also really cool and which we're going to do now is making these circular grids. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get I'm going to go get a curve and a circle, and I'm going to bring it up about that size. It doesn't really matter how big you make it, but make it fairly big. Click on this here, and we're going to go here on the wrench, add the Curve Modifier, and go ahead and select that curve. And look at that. It attaches itself to your curve. Now, what you can do here is bring up the size and make them touch. So we'll go all the way to the end, and you might go, oh, well, that's pretty ugly. Yes, it is. But you can fix that problem with the amount of cells you add. So the more cells, the closer you get to having square. So I'm going to go up here to a count of 40. And there we go. Now we have this. This almost looks like an above shot of Burning Man, if you know what I'm talking about. It's a music festival, and all the tents and stuff, they go in this circular pattern, and it's pretty cool. So I'm going to bring my size back because they're kind of touching right here. And as you can see, there's some lag, and that's because it does get computationally heavy once we get to those big pieces. But once you're done computing all the changes in the add-on, this is actually pretty low poly. So you're not actually adding like massive density. What you're seeing is what you're getting, just a bunch of cubes. All right, so we finished with this outer piece here. Now for me, I think I want the height to be a little bit more. Actually, let me think. I'm trying to remember how I initially designed this. Yeah, so I think the height can be a little bit more here. So 0.05, 0.08 might be a little better. So there we go. It looks a little bit better. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing here. Just make a smaller one here in the center. I'm just going to speed through that process. If you'd like to do that, you can do it as well. Just copy what I did right here. Now, as I'm designing the smaller one thing I did was I made my margin really small. That's one thing I did to make this piece in the middle less obnoxious than the one in the background. So that's kind of a little subtlety I added there for detail. If you'd like to do that, just bring your margin down and your distribution up a little bit. All right, so here we go. We have the initial piece here. We have the one in the middle and the one on the outside. The one in the middle is not quite so high, has more of a margin in it. And this one, it has more margin, higher pieces, and more bigger pieces. So we're kind of keeping that hierarchy of design here. All right, so what I'm going to do now is highlight these guys, and I'm going to hit Alt-D. And what that does is create an instance of the guys below, so we're not adding more topology to our scene. So now that we are bringing that up, we're starting to actually get into the design part of this tutorial. So we already have something really cool and very alien ship-like. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit the tilde key here and go to the very front. We're going to go ahead and set up our camera now so we can kind of visualize what's going on. I like to have fun while I'm designing, so setting up my camera, I can start to imagine how this scene is going to look. So we're going to go ahead and get another curve, and we're going to get the circle. Now for this one here in the outliner, I'm going to double click it and call it rig. And then we're going to get one more piece. We're creating a quick camera rig now. So we're going to go ahead and get an empty plain access, and we're going to call this track. So we have rig and track, and then let's go ahead and get in our camera. So let's get the camera and add two constraints to it. So the first constraint, so right here is where the constraints are. So click on the camera, click on constraints, and we're going to add in a follow path. Click on the target, and we're going to get rig. So that's super important. Now we can go ahead and take rig, and we can hit S and scale it out. We can even bring it up a little bit, but now that camera is tracked to our circle here. Now if we click here, let's go ahead and bring those resolution previews all the way up so there's no low polyness and kind of weirdness in the circle. Now one thing we can do is add one more constraint to the camera, and that is a track 2. So we're going to go ahead and click track 2, click this, and we're going to go ahead and click track. What that's going to do now is when we have that empty, that camera is going to follow that empty, so we can have some flexibility with where that camera is going without having to go in here and try to figure it out. It's really easy to just kind of visually have this camera rig ready for you to go. Let's go ahead and fix some of this stuff here. So we want the camera to kind of be pointing there, and then clicking on the camera, click on the little green camera icon. We're going to go here to like 24 millimeters, and then we're going to click on this here. I want to be right about there. I think we can bring these guys a little bit closer to the ground. So now we have this. Now what's really cool about these constraints we added is we go back to the constraints and get the follow path right here on offset. That's how we can get that really cool circular animation, and we are off to a really good start. Let's go ahead and save the scene. So we're gonna go ahead save as, put the desktop and just name it whatever you want, which is what I literally did. So have some fun with that if you want. All right, so now we have this. We're gonna go ahead and hit Z and render view, and we are in cycles. We're gonna be using Eevee. So click to the camera icon and click Eevee. There's no need to use cycles for this. Let's go ahead to the world, bring that brightness all the way to black, and then let's go ahead and get in a light. We're gonna get an area light here, and we're gonna bring it up. For the shape of the area light, click right over here. I'm gonna go here to disk. I'm not sure how much of a difference that makes, but if it does make a slight difference, it does matter to me. So we're going to bring that power up to 100 for now. Let's go ahead and add some volume into this scene. So I'm going to hit Shift A and get an object, and this is going to be our volume object. So scale it up to fit the whole scene. Control A, apply scale. Right over here, we don't want to really see it, so we're going to go here to viewport display. We're going to go here to wire. So now we're going to do that. Let's go back here, and we're going to click on the shading tab. I'm going to hit 0 to go to the camera view. Right up here, click that to see the render. Now we have the cube selected. We're going to click new, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Shift A, get in a volume. We're going to get a volume object, so principled volume in the search. Plug it there, and we're going to go to something like this. So that looks at about 0.1 on the density for now. Now, one thing we want to do in our Eevee settings is turn on Ambient Occlusion, Bloom, Screen Space Reflections, and Motion Blur. And then right here on Volumetrics, bring your tile size to 4. What that's going to do is give these nice beams a much better look. And if we were to render it right now, they'll look even better in the render. As you can see, they're much smoother rather than having your tile size at 8. So here on the tile size, even if you bring it over to 2, you'll get even smoother volumes. So now you have even better ones. It's very incrementally better, but it does up your render time and your preview times. So just keep it at 4 for this. Really, it's not going to be super crazy. Now click on the area light really quick. I'm going to go ahead and give it just a subtle blue color. That's what I always like to do here for these. So subtle blue. Let's go ahead and make a quick material for this. Make sure you are in the shading tab. Now this is a material I've made about 100 times, but it is, in my opinion, one of the most versatile materials you can use here in Blender when making these sort of metallic looking sci-fi scenes. So bring the metallic up here on this material. I'm going to go ahead and bring the color down a little bit. And we are working on this one right here, this model. So bring the color down. We're going to go ahead, Shift A, get a color ramp. And if you've seen the channel a whole bunch of times before, we're doing that material with the noise texture. So go ahead and get a noise texture here with the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. You just do that in the preferences here. It comes with Blender by default. Control T. I'm going to hit G to bring it up. And we're going to use the object coordinate. And then we're going to plug the factor into the color ramp. And we should see some stuff changing. Let's go ahead and let's bring that detail up to 12, that roughness up. If we bring this black portion in, and then this white portion in, now you're going to see some details start to show up, and that is what we want. Let's bring the black up just a little bit so it's not like a full mirror. Now we have some details. So what we're just going to do here is we're going to click on this guy, hold down Shift, click on this guy, Control L, which links things, and we'll link materials. And there we go. Now we have materials, and because these guys up here are instances of this guy down here, they have the material as well, and that's really fun. So we already have like a pretty cool kind of game concept going for us already, and if we get this area light, we do want to make it a little bit brighter. So I'm going to give my brightness at 500, and then I do want to move this area light up like this so that in the render, we don't actually want to see the source of light. We want it to be higher up. So now we're going to go ahead and start adding some other objects here to this scene. And I'm going to go ahead and actually bring this guy up a little bit and save my file. Let's go ahead back to the flat view and let's get in a icosphere. Right down here, we're going to go ahead and bring the subdivisions down to 1. This is one of my favorite modeling things to do here. So we're going to bring that down a little bit. We're going to click on the modifiers here, add modifier, wireframe, bring up the thickness a little bit. Let's go ahead and add in a bevel modifier. So add the bevel, and then the last thing we're going to do is add in a subdivision surface to that bevel and bring up that subdivision, right click, shade smooth, and then we're going to go ahead and bring that thickness of the wireframe up to something like this. And then now we can just bring this straight up to the middle, make it a little bit smaller, and I'm going to go ahead and Shift D, duplicate this guy like that. And then we're going to make one more duplication, Shift D, bring it down. And then what we're going to want to do here for hierarchy, visual hierarchy, we're going to get this, and let's go ahead and bring the thickness down on this one. And this one, bring the thickness down even farther. So now we get a little bit of visual hierarchy, and I'm going to hit R twice and just kind of rotate them to see how they'll look in my scene. And then if I go here, looks pretty cool. I'm going to get in a icosphere again, but this time I'm going to subdivide him quite a bit with this dialog down here. Right click, shade smooth, and we're going to bring it all the way down. I do want to make sure that he fits within this here. So I'm just going to get a view. Yep, looks like everything fits correctly. That's what we want. He will be the focal point. He will be the piece that kind of brings the focal point in. One really interesting thing, one really important thing to know about design is when it comes to focal point, it's either the darkest or brightest point of your scene, giving you a nice contrast, and that's going to be this here. I'm going to click on the camera icon, go to color management, make sure your view transform is on filmic and you're on high contrast. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the 3 objects that I made, holding down shift, of course, and then the last one, click here, Control L, link materials. So now we have this going on here. What I'm going to do though is make these brighter in a little bit. Let's go ahead and design this material here. So let's go back to shading. If you've seen the channel a whole bunch and you want to zoom through, we're going to add an emission and a layer weight. But if you've never done that before, get a new material, click this, Shift A, EM in the search for emission, plug that there. We're going to get in a color ramp. We're going to plug this here, and then we're going to make this a green. Love to have some green glowing here. So the last node we're going to add is a layer weight. So search, LAY, layer weight. We're going to do facing here. And then now you can kind of see how there's a gradient. We're going to bring that strength up pretty high. We're going to go from linear to B-spline so you get a more smooth gradient, and then you can bring that in a little bit if you'd like. And then this blend right here, you can see how that kind of works. So now, let's see how this is looking in our scene. So I'm going to hit 0 to go to the camera view. And then I'm going to make this kind of that color here. And then you play with your blend until you get a material that you want. So that looks pretty good. All right, so now we're going to start the animation process, but I mentioned a minute ago we are going to make these brighter because I want these icospheres to be more of a focal point. So one really cool thing you can do, you can see this number 5 right here in the shading. We're in the shading tab right here. You see how there's 5. That means this one material is on 5 objects. So if you change this material, it's going to change on all the objects. So if you click the 5, makes a duplicate, and now you have a unique material. The reason why we want it to be unique is because now we're going to make this one much brighter here. And then what you can do is, now that you can't see it's much brighter, we're going to darken these in a minute. What we're going to do here is click this model, that one in the middle, and then this one that we just changed, Control L, link materials. Now those are brighter. We're going to go ahead and get these materials to be a good bit darker. And then we're just going to go ahead and bring up that brightness in a little bit. So now we have a better focal point. So you can see these are much darker and these are much brighter. So you get more of a focal point and you get the glare to really attach itself here. So that's something really cool. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and start animating. So let's go into the preference here, edit preferences. And one thing we need to do is go into the animation and make sure your default interpolation is set to linear. So what we're going to do is going to click on our camera and we're going to go and animate those constraints we made. So I'm going to give myself 500 frames. May seem like a lot, but you're using Eevee, so it'll render much, much quicker than any Cycles animation at 500 frames. So we're going to go right over here and we're going to start at frame 0. That's super, super important for making this loop. If you don't care about looping, don't worry about that. So we're going to get our offset all the way over here to 0. In this particular constraint, a value of 100 is a perfect loop. So if you click here, and then I'm going to click this right over here, and then type in 100, enter. You didn't see anything change, but it did a full circle. So just to show you that, I'll click on the keyframe. Now we're doing a full circle here. And if we go back here, we're going to get a seamless loop. It paused, but that's just because of the viewport. If we go here, it's a seamless loop already. Now we're going to go ahead and animate our icospheres really quickly. Now I want them to start where they're at right now because it gives it a more organic looking animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of them. I'm going to hit Control A and apply rotation. So that means they're going to start where they're at. So it's sort of an organic thing for the look. If you don't care, you can just set them all back to a rotation of 0 where they started. So what I'm going to do is a little bit of rotation fun. I've taught this a couple times here in the channel. It's one of my favorite things to do. So one thing is, the bigger the object, the slower I want it to rotate. So the first one we're going to do is this keyframe and this keyframe. Of course, starting at frame 0, we're going to go to the end and type in 360 and 360. That's going to give us a perfect rotation. And then if we look at this, now we have that rotating. We're going to go back to frame 0. I'm going to click on the second biggest object, and I'm going to animate these two here. And then I'm going to do 360 times 3, and that's going to give us 1080. And then this one, I'm going to do 720. So these are all rotations. So now this one's going to rotate 3 times. This one's going to rotate 2 times. You can see it's rotating faster than this object. So it gives you this really, really cool effect. And on the smaller one, I'm going to do a 360 times 5. So I'm going to do these two axes. So I'm going to just slide over them, go to the very end. So 360 times 5, that's 1800. And this one I'm going to do negative 1800. And now we have our animation, our rotating piece here doing its thing. Last thing I want to animate is the focal point, the aspect ratio of our lens. That's really, really fun to do. I do want to go ahead and in our preferences, go back to the animation, default interpolation, make it Bezier. Super important for this. So now in this particular instance, we don't need to start at frame 0. So if you don't know what I mean by aspect ratio, focal length, it's this right here. So I want to animate that. So I'm going to start here really close in, right in on our objects like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and start my keyframe. I want it to kind of sit there for a little bit. So something like this. Click keyframe, and then I want to give it a good amount of time to slide all the way out to 24 millimeters. In fact, we can even go farther out to be kind of crazy like that. So if we check that animation, it'll slowly go back, zoom way out, which is a really cool effect. And then now I want it to kind of zoom in a little bit for kind of a refresher, something like that. And so if we check that animation, it's going to zoom way out, kind of give you a big look at what's going on, and then bring you back in. And then I kind of want it to sit there for a little bit. And so I'm going to click this keyframe so that it sits. Maybe sit it right there. I'm going to bring it back again to right there. And then let's go see where it started. We're at 66 millimeters. So we're going to go all the way to the end here and bring it at 66 millimeters. So I want it to stop and start at 66 so that it loops. So now if we check that animation, it's going all the way out. Comes all the way back in, sits there for a minute, zooms out again, and then we're going to zoom all the way back in for this really cool animation. Now for volume, I want to click on my cube. It's a little bit too much. Well, first off, let's bring in that contrast to a very high contrast. It's a little bit too much. So what we're going to do is first, maybe the area light is too powerful. So something like that. And then we can also bring down our volume. So click on the cube in the outliner, go back to shading. And because it's just so washed out, just bring it in something like this. Actually, let's do 0.08. And that should give us something a little bit better. So there we go. So that is the animation that we've created. In my original animation, I went around and added a little bit more flair to some things like that, but I'm gonna leave that part up for your creative control. Whatever else you wanna add, some particles, some tubes, some other things like that, feel free to add to this animation to make it yours, but that is how we create this. If you wanna know how to export it, click on this little printer icon, make your resolution whatever you'd like it to be. You can even change the aspect ratio of this to make it look more cinematic or for mobile, whatever you want to do there. And then right here, you can change your frame rate. You can go here and click where you want to save it. So click that file. If you want to do a PNG sequence and compile it yourself, you can just leave it here at default. If you want to just have Blender give you a full finished video, we'll click on PNG. We'll go to FFmpeg video, encoding to MP4, and output quality to perceptually lossless. And when you're done, render animation, let it render out all your frames, and you'll have a really, really cool animation. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next tutorial.